The American banana, otherwise known as the Paw Paw, is a pretty unique fruit. You won't find it in stores really because it's very difficult to transport, but you can grow it in your backyard, and I'm going to plant them today. I have the two saplings soaking in a bucket of water. According to the package, the roots come dipped in what's called TerraSorb gel. It's a rich polymer coating that seals the moisture in the roots. So they tell you to soak your roots for 2 hours to remove the gel, and then they're good to go. So these have been sitting in this water for 2+ hours, and now I'm going to plant them. One I'm going to plant in the ground, and the second I'm actually going to plant in a container. I've read conflicting accounts on whether a pawpaw can be container grown, so I'm going to try it, because in all honesty, I don't have room to grow them. 2 years ago, I ordered a bunch of pawpaws from Edible Acres. I got about 20 plants from them, but they were super tiny. I don't know if you can see it in here. Let me see if I can show it to you. This is it right here. Let me get it up here. There we go. Try not have it focus on the cage I've got around it protecting it. There we go. Well, anyway, that's it right there. Now, they were actually even smaller than that. Not much different, but a little bit smaller than that when I got them. I originally had them planted in the corner of my garden, protected them, and then in the springtime, about half of them survived the winter and sprouted. So I ended up planting 2 of them, because I really don't have much room, as I said, to grow too many more fruit trees. So I have one here, and I've actually got one in front of my house too, where an older tree was damaged by a snowstorm, and that was cut down, taken away, and it's been an empty spot there. So I thought putting a pawpaw tree there to actually share with the community as it grows in the years to come would be a good idea. I despaired come the springtime now, because it's getting towards the end of March. It's late in March, and I despaired that they weren't going to grow. So I went and I ordered 2 more trees to replace these. But now I'm looking at them and I'm thinking, well, maybe they're actually going to grow. From what I've read, they do bloom late. So I don't know if this is actually dead, and I'm afraid to actually scrape the bark because there's so little of it. As I said, I went and I ordered 2 more, which are much bigger. Now I don't know whether I should plant them here or in a new spot. So what I think I'm going to do is plant them in a different location. If these actually end up surviving, well, then I'll have 4 pawpaw trees, which will help with getting them to eventually produce fruit. It's not exactly what I wanted, but maybe these won't survive. And I think eventually the container grown one will need to be planted in the ground somewhere. So if I end up having a separate fruit tree failure of some other kind, I could always plant it from the container into that location. Otherwise, I can wheel it around to wherever I need it. I'm going to be planting the tree in the ground behind my pond. And right around here is where I'm going to be putting it. This extension cord goes to the greenhouse. Another project for this year is running an underground electrical line to the greenhouse to electrify the pallet greenhouse. If you haven't seen my video on building a pallet greenhouse, I'll leave a link to it up at the top here. So right back here is pretty far away from where the actual pond is and all the underground hose works from there. And it's going to be right in the middle right in between two goji shrubs that I've planted there, and are now starting to leaf out. So right here, you'll get some protection. I would imagine in a few years, it'll end up growing up high enough that it'll end up covering or shading out the greenhouse. But if I keep it again to the same sort of backyard orchard dimensions that I've been keeping my other fruit trees, then it really shouldn't be much of a problem. So this is where the Paw Paw is going to be going. I've got a thick ground cover of wood chips, a good 6 to 8 inches deep on the ground here. So I need to scrape that away to get down to the earth. And then what I'll do is I'll make a hole probably about 2 feet round, probably about a foot deep, depending on the size of the rootstock. But then I'll fill the bottom of the hole with aged compost from the chicken coop. We'll plant that, we'll put that in the bottom, and then we'll plant the Paw Paw sapling right on top of it. Two things I see right away. One is just a couple of years with wood chips on top, and the soil is super rich underneath where the wood chips were, just from them degrading over time. The second thing is I've got a corm here from a I think it's an iris that I planted. I forgot all about that I had planted it there, but it looks like it's getting ready to bloom, or sprout, I should say. So I'm going to dig that out carefully, and I'm going to transplant that somewhere else. But this is where I'll be putting the Paw Paw. Don't try this at home, folks, but I'm going to be digging this hole with slip-on shoes rather than my work boots. But the ground actually should be pliable enough because of the wood chips that it should be easy to dig through. If not, I'll be getting my work boots. Yeah, that's pretty easy. And I'd like to also point out how deep this terrific soil goes. This is 6 inches right now, and it's just dark, rich, friable compost. Now just below that, I am hitting the old clay. I'm going to separate that soil into a separate bucket so that the tree only has really rich, nutrient-dense earth to grow in. I think you can, well, without the dog in the way. And you can see the difference in the soil there, how gray and clay-like that is down there. So I'm going to dig that out, and then I'm going to put in the chicken compost. All right, that should be a good depth for it. Now we'll get the compost. This is the compost from the chicken pen. This is aged over a year, and as you can see, it looks just like dirt. This was a mix of vegetables that I bring in, leaves, straw, and just let the chickens do their job of sorting it out, composting it down. If you haven't seen that video, I'll link to my step-by-step process for chicken composting in a small suburban space. But now, this is going into the Paw Paw tree hole. Now, I'm going to add some bone meal and a little bit of blood meal, some organic slow-release fertilizer, so that when the roots start to reach out and search for nutrients, they'll have it in the hole. First things first though, dog requires that I throw him the ball. He's hiding behind that tree over there, waiting for the ball. He lives for the ball. No precise measurement on the bone meal. Just gonna shake a little bit in. If I had to guess, probably quarter to half a cup. I'll do the same thing with the bone meal. I also have some earthworm castings. I used to have my own worm bin, but it just never seemed fruitful enough to me. So I purchased now a bag of castings and use it, not generously, but throw it in there to help build the soil. A good handful or so. A few other amendments I like to throw in. A little bit of garden lime. And the reason I use the lime is because I'm also going to add some Epsom salts, and that'll provide magnesium for the plant. And the lime helps the Epsom salts be taken up by the plant. But I'm not going to use this whole thing. You don't need much. And you need even less of the Epsom salts. So I'm just gonna throw a little bit in. A little bit goes a long way. And in that same vein, I'm gonna add some borax, which will provide boron to the soil. Another key ingredient that's needed. And this you really just need minimal amounts. You don't need much boron. And one last thing I'm going to add is peat moss. Paw Paws, they really appreciate a slightly acidic soil, anywhere from 5.5 to 7. So the peat moss will help to keep the pH down, particularly after having put the lime in there, which tends to sweeten the soil. And I'm going to put in about that much, which is probably about the equivalent of a shovelful or so of peat moss. And now I'm going to mix it all in. Now the pawpaw can be planted on that. It will have a nice foundation from which to grow. Okay, this is the root of the pawpaw, and it actually looks like it has some moss or lichen growing on it there. So something's alive with it anyway. But this looks like about where the tree was planted to. I don't know if this is grafted or not, but this is about where I'm going to plant it up to. So I'll come to just below that little line there. You know, neighbors' dogs are going crazy. So what I've done is I've taken a board and I've placed it across the hole to show where ground level line is, and that way I'll know just about where to plant the root up to. So it'll be the bottom of that board is what I'll be shooting for. And right there looks pretty good. this. This is the good soil. Okay, now I can get down on my hands and knees and firm that in. So I've got my kneeling pad. Jesus. So I've got my kneeling pad because my knees aren't what they used to be. Even though the soil is fairly moist right now, you still want to water it in really well. That'll help remove any air pockets that might be in there. And if it needs more soil on top, I can always add that afterwards. And then I'll put the mulch back over the top, the wood chips back over the top, but I'll keep them away from the trunk of the tree. I'm also going to drive a stake into the ground to help stabilize it. But I'm going to do that on either side of the Paw Paw, because when winds come through and everything, you want to make sure nothing disturbs the roots. So the next thing I'll do is I'll show you how I planted the other one in the container. In this instance, the container has actually already been prepared, and it was actually prepared for vegetables because I was going to plant vegetables in here. But when I realized I didn't have any real space for the Paw Paw, I decided I'll plant one in a container. And this is one of those half whiskey barrels that you can get. And it's made out of resin. There's holes drilled in the bottom for drainage. And it's been filled with peat, compost, the exact same amendments that went into that other hole, with the addition of perlite in here. And so I'm just gonna separate a hole into here, place the tree into the hole, and then cover it up. So again, it's essentially the same thing, but with a in a container. This one, the roots seem a little bit longer on here, and I could probably trim them up if I wanted to, but I'm not going to bother. I'll just dig the hole deep enough so that it fits in. And as you can see, it kind of cants to the side. Gives me a little dog leg there. And I'm probably going to come up to about, you can't see. I don't have a place to put my tripod that you'd be able to see. So I'm going to come up to about this node right here. So I'm going to do this with one hand. And you can see the peat that's in there. Can't see all the amendments, but they're in there too. Let's see how this looks. Well, curling that little root at the bottom is probably okay, but let's clear it out a little bit more for it. All right, let's see. So we get the root sticking all the way down in there, and it's going to go right about there. So I'm going to need to put this down for a second so I can knock this dirt in while I'm holding this tree up. So hold on just a second. Okay, started putting the dirt in, and now I can lift it up a little bit so that it comes up to where I want it in terms of the top of the soil. And now, and you don't have to worry about damaging the plant by putting it like this. Now, don't want to go too much, but I am going to press this down some more. Okay, that should be good. And this will be watered in, and here too, it'll be staked. Right now it's underneath my apricot orchard. I've got my two apricot trees, and I'm hopeful there'll be some fruit this year. They started off as tiny little twigs, not much more than a branch like this, And in 2+ years time, they've grown nicely. Might be a little early yet for the apricot, for the tree to start producing apricots, but I can be hopeful anyway. And I can always put my hand truck underneath this and wheel it out of the way to wherever it might suit it best. There's some good sun here, but a sapling, small tree, you don't want to give it too much sun. It can stand sun to partial shade, but when it's young, you want to give it more shade than sun, and until it establishes itself and starts growing. So that's it for planting pawpaw trees.